So it looks like we have a small group or smaller than usual for this weekend, which is lovely. Just when was it? Last weekend. 2 weeks ago we had a unusually large uh, weekend course with Amrita Kriya Yoga, joined by over 40 people. Was it? I think like 44. So unusually large at this point of the mission. And then last weekend there was the last of 4 weekends of training for Amrita Mandala instructors, new instructors, acharyas, and that was joined by 5 people, I think. Um, when the group is smaller, it's of course um becomes possible to make it more intimate. Um, Probably the energy will also be a bit more, how do you say, punchy. Um, so we also have a relatively small group this weekend. So again, good to see everybody. This weekend is well, let's think about I always like to, in the beginning of the year, in like January, when we have the first retreat of the year, uh, starting the first half of the year, and when we have the September retreat, which starts the second half of the year, this is like a thinking of the year split in two, first half and second half. It's I think it's actually comes from the days of the Buddha, that they used to have, in Japanese it's called ango, which means like a training period. So I think it originally comes from the seasons, because you know, in many Asian countries it gets too hot to practice intensively in the summer. So that's why they kind of had a break in the summer, and then short break uh, before the start of new year. So that's why the split into two training seasons. I've also experienced this in myself back in Japan in monastery. So this is still practiced, and also I like to think, maybe probably because I've been exposed to this kind of year split into two training periods, is why I still think that way. So to me, this first retreat of the autumn is kind of starting of a new training season. It feels that way, and I often, this is my next month in October. It's been 15 years that I've been teaching full time, professionally. So that's how I've thought about it, especially when we've had, our present Sangha and the way we practiced for since maybe since like 10 years ago, I could roughly say. Uh, um, I've thought about this way, the training seasons, and also kind of planning what I'm gonna teach and what I'm gonna present at different points of the season, what I'm gonna teach. So, well, it's basically the same teaching throughout the year, from one year to the next, because basic state is what it is. But nevertheless, this kind of thinking is there, that I want to ground some, how to say, create some ground or foundation, and then build on that in the following retreats until the Christmas retreat. And the main topic of this whole autumn training season is, well, Ishanat, Jesus Christ, Maranat, Ishanatha or Maranatha, with or without the A in the end. So Ishanat or Maranat, and their Guru Yoga practice with them. But also speaking about like as you know, I think that everybody joining this session, you are familiar with my work. So couple of new names on the list, but well, just to make it clear, just to clarify, for the past 2.5 years roughly, I've been studying and figuring out what there is more to wisdom aspect, or what more there is to spiritual practice and yoga on top of emptiness realization or shunyata realization, which is like a Buddhist concept. And this is also something, there is a quote, um, like there's a Facebook event of this retreat, and there's a quote there that I wrote briefly about the light body, rainbow body. Uh, it's so for the past 2 years roughly, I've been figuring out, going into my laboratory of yogic experiments, being greatly blessed and helped greatly. I couldn't, again, like I always say this, but I would have never been able to figure out even 1% that I have without my gurus, without my masters, without Mahasiddha gurus. So for the past 2 years, namely Babaji, the same Babaji who is very famous from Autobiography of a Yogi, written by Yogananda, Babaji, then Agastya, who is one of Babaji's gurus, and who's actually the fountainhead of, I guess you could even go make like a big statement and say that he's the fountainhead of all Sanatana Dharma, all Hindu Dharma, Agastya. So, I received so many, like a casket full of golden chunks of gold from Babaji, Agastya, Maranath recently, and just transmissions from few other masters, Ishanath, Mataji, Tirumular, regarding light body, rainbow body, which, to make this, one problem with the term light body or rainbow body is that it sounds so high flying. High flying, do you understand? Is that a word in English? High flying, like something poetic or romantic or fantastical. So light body, rainbow body, I often think about those terms because they are associated with something that, for example, there are these stories about Babaji that he's this ancient master, saint, yogi master who has lived in the body for 2000 years. And some other kind of wild or fantastical stories are associated with masters who have attained light body. But I don't, that's not really the way at all how I look at things. And also, actually, the same applies to emptiness realization on the Buddhist side of things, that it is thought that somebody who realizes emptiness of all phenomena, all mental, emotional phenomena, that they are somehow very, very special people who are, sit on thrones or fly in the air or are able to do some these kind of things. But that is not my experience, and So I think that Dharma really needs to be down to earth. And one thing actually that Babaji told me some time ago, that uh, what was the exact, that Siddhis, I don't remember the exact quote how he said it, but the point was that that Siddhis, some uh, what are those called? Supernatural powers, that they are just a distraction, really. So people start, you know, my respect and my bows to Yogananda, but I think that his book did both service to the world spirituality, but also quite a bit of disservice, because uh, he spoke about things that I highly doubt are true. And if they are true, and he wrote them in the book as he witnessed them, he just made people distracted a lot. And so there are really weird views and ideas what realization of emptiness is, or realization of light body is. But let's think about this in a bit different way. So each one of us has uh, basically three things. We have awareness, that we are aware, that when we hear things and see things, we are aware of those, that, when we see, look at the room, there is information coming through our eyes, and there is awareness of that information. There is awareness at the base of seeing, awareness at the base of hearing, feeling, thinking. So we have one, awareness, basic awareness. Then two, we have mind. We have, or psyche. We have mind, psyche, that is the functioning of our subtle body. What does that mean? Thinking, feeling, energetic events, subtle energy flowing through our subtle bodies, and uh, having us have all kinds of memories and associations and ideas, and of course samsaric, reacting, negative emotions, anxiety, fear, and so on. So awareness, and then mind, and then physical body. Enlightenment happens in these three bodies. It doesn't happen anywhere else. So it happens in these three bodies. This is the, how to say, like a cultivation field. Like a farmer cultivates a field, similarly yogis cultivate this field, these bodies. And this is where enlightenment and becoming enlightened gradually happens. So one thing that I feel very strongly about is pragmatization of Dharma and pragmatization of yoga, which uh, at least just drop off, uh, how to say, drop away any preconceptions about these experiences, preconceptions about awakening, and then post-awakening stages and enlightenment. So these really need to be shed off. I remember back in my days in monastery in Japan, I had a friend who there is still a good friend of mine, and he was reading some biographies of ancient Chinese Zen masters, and he was reading it and very, inspired by these stories, perhaps getting a bit carried away, and he was speaking about this with an older Dharma brother in the monastery, an older monk. And the monk listened to my friend being so excited about, that it's so grandiose and great and fantastical and somehow somehow especially awesome. And the monk just said that, just focus on you having your own experiences rather than think of whatever is told about ancient masters or whatever Yogananda wrote of Babaji or what Yogananda wrote of people he met. So, really bringing it to the ground. And I think that this really needs to be done also. So during the last 100 years, and more specifically last 50 years, different teachings of Dharma and yoga in different forms, physical, meditative, tantra, have been brought from Asia to West. So it's a new thing in the West. But I think it's very important at this point to really pay attention to this thing and filter out imagined stuff from the real stuff, and to focus on things that is really important from the perspective of getting awakened and enlightened, and drop away things, ideas, practices, views, dreams that are not helpful at all. So I think this is very important when we, if we think of a future of humanity and future of yoga as a worldwide phenomenon, if we think 100 years from now, 200 years, 500 years from now, have you ever thought of that? Life on earth in 200 years, but also yoga. What is the use of yogic teachings, spiritual teachings, if they are not really, don't make sense? I think this is actually spiritual teachings and practices not making sense. It's already been a huge problem in Asia, but what happens when some form or set of teachings becomes a lineage and tradition is that often people become followers of that tradition. They become reluctant to ask questions about their tradition because they are so invested in it. But I think one thing is like a characteristic of genuity, is that the word, genuineness of practice, is that you become to know yourself. You get to know your own basic state. And when that happens, it is the opposite of becoming invested in ideas or views or practices or traditions. You become free of those things. You become free of attachments. And that's why for somebody who has really advanced in practice, it is no problem at all, and should be no problem at all, to make questions and question one's investments. I have always said to my students, members of our Sangha, that, if you find a better method than what I teach, follow that method, because I would make that decision. Because the priority is always getting enlightened. The quicker, the better. it is not a competition, meaning that you have to compete with others in getting enlightened, but it makes sense because we don't know how much time we have. We might have illness coming our way. We might have very difficult life situation coming our way. We might be dead in a week or a year. So how much time do we have? This is why it is very, very important to look at yoga practice not from a devotional perspective, when you kind of turn a blind eye on results and benefits, but look also from that perspective, both devotional but also have discrimination. Think about it. What am I doing here? Where is this leading? Where is this supposed to be leading? What am I really doing with this? And of course, you could say that the main purpose of all yogic paths is awakening and enlightenment. What is awakening and enlightenment? So there are I was speaking about three bodies. And there's the one in the middle, the mind, is split into two separate, separate fields. There are two different subtle bodies. One made of nadis, or one subtle body made of subtler channels, and another subtle body made of grosser channels, nadis and meridians. Nadis create the aura, the aura about 1.2 meters, 1.3, 1.4 meters around the body, and also nadis are inside the physical body. And then we have meridians. Meridians are only inside the physical body and on the surface of it. So we have these two, nadis and meridians. The reason why I call the other one the body of meridians or meridian field is because 20 years ago I was practicing shiatsu, masseur. So I practiced, shiatsu is a Japanese form of massage that makes use of acupuncture points. So shiatsu is based on traditional Chinese medicine, which speaks of meridians. I don't actually remember what is the Chinese word for meridian, but I guess 100 years ago when somebody started translating traditional Chinese books, classics, they used I guess it's a Latin word originally, meridian, which means like a line. But anyway, I learned about meridians 20 years ago, and also Babaji. Like I said, that I received help, great help, chunks of gold from my masters. He used that term, meridian field. So the main difference, by the way, how some of you might be familiar with traditional Chinese medicine and meridians, how they teach it and use them. So they usually only speak about 20 or so meridians. So if you go to make a Google search about meridians in traditional Chinese medicine, you will find these maps that have these lines as if drawn on the human body. And there are not that many lines. So it looks like kind of just like 20 lines drawn with a marker around the body. So there's lots of spaces around those lines and also lots of space around individual points according to traditional Chinese medicine. But the point that Babaji helped me to understand was that it is not actually just one line there with one line there, another over there with lots of space in between. The meridian field, it's like a continuous fabric that covers the whole insides of the body. It's not only one line there and another there. The whole body, the whole insides of the body space, reaching a little bit outside the skin, it's full of those channels, full of meridians. So these are the two bodies. And uh, so we have nadis and we have meridians. So we have subtler channels and grosser channels. And so when we ask what is awakening or what is enlightenment, this is actually when you make that question to, I mentioned Yogananda, for example. Well, the point that I'm trying to say, I'll just skip straight to it. The point that I'm trying to make is that it is very difficult to find a presentation of awakening, enlightenment relating to the subtle body that has everything covered. That doesn't have blind spots or information missing or practices missing. It is very difficult to find such a presentation. Very difficult. Of course, everybody tries their best, but I couldn't have figured it out without those chunks of gold, those golden nuggets from my gurus. So, but that's exactly, we need to have that all-encompassing information and knowledge if we want to get this thing done, if we want to become awakened and have awakening experiences, more than one or more than two, and then become fully enlightened. And what full enlightenment is, I have in Amrita Mandala we have published 3 books, my first 3 books that explains and gives practices to so there are two different subtle bodies, and there are different practices for both bodies in Amrita Mandala. So we call the side that works with wisdom and emptiness, we call that, we have 2 different names for both subtle bodies and for working with the subtle bodies. And the body that works with nadis, wisdom, emptiness, is the path of clarity and wisdom. The main practice for that path is rainbow body yoga and guru yoga with Buddhist gurus, mainly Guru Padmasambhava and Yeshe Tsogyal. Guru Padmasambhava's tanka is behind me, and there's also a statue right behind me where Guru Rinpoche Padmasambhava is sitting here, and this is Yeshe Tsogyal with her back towards the camera. So path of clarity and wisdom for nadis. And that's also where we use the path map of 13 Bhumi model. 13 Bhumis that relate to the aura, the nadis, the different vibratory areas of the aura. Okay, so that is the body where the wisdom side of enlightenment is cultivated and reached. Wisdom side through seeing emptiness of all mental, emotional, and energetic phenomena. This is half of enlightenment, not full enlightenment. There's a lot of emphasis in Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism, the great vehicle Buddhism, a lot of emphasis on emptiness, but this is not full enlightenment yet. You could say that it's first stage of full enlightenment, but it is not the last stage of full enlightenment. When you realize, when you purify the 13 bhumis, meaning when you purify the nadi system inside the body and outside the body in the aura, it is a very, very significant turning point to the individual. We have so far 19 of my students have reached that point. I think there's 20th, but the 20th person is still on, how do you say, like a trial period. So let's see if it sticks, if it stays. But you know, this is that's half of full enlightenment, let's say. And when I pointed out that it's difficult to find presentations that have everything covered, you know, this wisdom side, it is almost non-existent in Sanatana Dharma. Clarity about this wisdom side, clarity about purification of nadis and bhumis, it is almost non-existent in Sanatana Dharma. But in Buddhism it's given emphasis, and especially Mahayana Buddhism, Tantrayana Buddhism is given emphasis. And then there's the other subtle body of meridians, and in Amrita Mandala we call it path of healing and light. Path of healing and light, where the main practice is Amrita Kriya Yoga that I taught 2 weeks ago, and Guru Yoga with Hindu gurus. Why Buddhist Tantra for the nadis and Hindu Tantra for the meridians? Because nadis and meridians are like a networks of channels, but the frequency is different. Frequency is different. It's kind of like a, well, to use a very simple musical analogy, the other one is kind of like low frequencies, like bass frequencies, like bass guitar, and the other one is, the nadis are like normal guitar. So it's a same music, it plays the same music and understands the same music, but it's on different level of frequencies, different octaves, you would say, in music. I like to use musical analogies because I was trained in music, I was a musician long time ago and made a lot of music. Hopefully my analogies make sense, that you can understand them. So meridians, what is the path of healing and light? I didn't name the path of healing and light with something like a path of light and levitation, or path of light and bilocation. Bilocation is something that Yogananda wrote in his book, which means that somebody can be present and appear physically in 2 places or even more places. This is called bilocation. Yes, I think it's possible to feel somebody, but I have my doubts about that. I don't know. I have never seen that myself, and I don't think it's important, such things. But what is important is healing, which means that I think it can be said, based on what I've observed in myself, and also what I've observed in my students, especially the past year, I think it can be said that most traumas, psychic trauma, it is stored in the meridian system. Not so much in the nadis. A little bit, but not so much. Most of it is, to use a very simple description, it's stuck in the body, traumas. So they are actually in the meridians, but it feels like it's stuck in the body because meridians, like I said, nadis are very subtle and meridians are gross. Meridians is the grosser type of subtle body, which is very close with the physical body. And that's why, traumas stored in meridians feels very physical. When you have um, whatever, typically people with traumas have anxiety, fears, being fearful a lot in very normal, common situations, daily situations, anxiety, and so on. It feels very physical. You lose sense of your legs, your stomach gets loose or tight, and so on. So it's very physical what is going on in the meridians. And the thing is that, the reason, this is how I would explain what light body or rainbow body means. It means that when we purify through the whole meridian system, what is revealed is the original condition, the original enlightened condition, which is very physical. And again, because meridians are so closely entangled, how do you say, occupy the same space as physical cells, is why, what was I going to say, is why it's, well, it feels so physical. And there are indications of this, yogis, yoginis, masters who achieved small or complete rainbow body, which means that when somebody who has purified, maybe you could say more than 50% or 70-80% of the meridians, and 70-80% of the meridian body are completely clear, completely pure, rests in original purity. When such a person passes away, the body starts shrinking after death. So it actually physically shrinks. There's lots of evidence of this, not only from history from the past, but recent occurrences. The last example of this is from Tibet from 2016 or 2017, where a Tibetan Buddhist nun who had actually lived a long lay life, but she became a nun at older age. She had been a practitioner all her life, since she was a small child or young woman, I guess, practicing mantras, studying Dharma, learning from lamas and rinpoches. So there was this one Buddhist nun whose body shrank. There are photographs of her. I've shared them on my Facebook profile a number of times. Also in our Sangha. Don't remember her name and couldn't pronounce it anyway, because I don't know how to pronounce Tibetan. But it happens. It happens, shrinking of body, when somebody has purified most of meridians and passes away, the body shrinks. There's evidence of this. And full rainbow body or full light body means that when such a master, yogi, yogini passes away, the physical body disappears. No remains. No remains at all. And there's actually, between the small rainbow body and the full rainbow body, there's also one in between where nails and hair are left on. But that's just like a stage in between the two. But when we have full light body or full rainbow body and the physical body disappears, it means that the whole meridian system has been purified. It doesn't mean anything else. So what happens at death is that the physical remains, the body, the corpse, simply dissolves in basic awareness. It simply dissolves. Because the reason why it completely dissolves is because the physical body, through the meridian system that connects with all the atoms and cells of the body that create the body, is connected with basic awareness. So it just dissolves in basic awareness. That's how it works. So path of healing and light means that with the help of Hindu gurus, masters of the tradition of Sanatana Dharma, and also through Amrita Kriya Yoga, through the deities of Amrita Kriya Yoga, so-called Amrita deities, we work with meridian system and do a big cleansing on it. And so with nadis, there are clearly 10 stages of purification, the 10 bhumis, opening of 10 bhumis and perfecting of 10 bhumis. But with meridians, it's a little bit different because it is just a continuous fabric of meridians. So, that vibrates on the same frequency. But from my own experience, I can say and have recognized 3 main stages in meridian purification. First, the meridians in the body, they become clear from the center line of the body. You can think of the center inside the head that continues through the neck to the trunk, from the center and insides of the trunk to the center and insides of arms and fingers, and centers and insides of legs, lower legs, feet and toes. So first the core of the body gets cleared out, and that first phase can be quite rough. If you have trauma, especially developmental trauma, which means that the trauma hasn't only developed from one single event, like a shocking event, but has developed over a long time of very scary and anxious experiences. So if you have developmental trauma, then it can be a pretty rough ride in the beginning for that first center of the body to open up. So that's first phase. Second phase is it becomes a bit more easier, and that center line in limbs and in the trunk, in the head, expands a little bit towards the skin. Expands. It's a little larger space. So you use the same practices, and it simply keeps, first it clears out the center, the very insides of the body, and then you continue same practices and it simply expands. So the purified meridians increase. Second stage. Second stage can also be quite rough, but in my experience it was easier than the first phase. And then the third phase is when the remaining parts of the meridian field gets purified, meaning that it expands all the way to the skin. So whatever is left after second phase simply expands and covers the whole meridian body. That's how it works. And so we have practices for this, specific practices, just like we have very specific practices for purifying nadis. I'm very proud of the teachings that we have and the work that we have achieved and the results that have come from it. So like I said, we have 19, perhaps in 1 or 2 weeks I can announce 20 people who have so far purified all their boomies, nadis. And that alone, if you have practiced in more traditional traditions, you know that what I just said is sensational on worldwide scale. It is actually sensational to have people who have purified and perfected all their bhumis, and so many of them in such a small sangha. So I'm not bragging, I'm just saying that it is sensational because I practiced I've been everywhere practicing and practicing with so many people, doing retreats with so many people, Buddhists, Taoists, Hindus, and having done a lot of energetical analysis and bhumi analysis, so I know exactly how sensational it is, and I'm just stating that it is unheard of. No need to believe, no need, never believe anything that I say. You know, I've given the tools to verify whether what I'm saying is real and true or not. I've given the tools. So I'm asking you, please do not believe. Do not only believe. Find out for yourself. Learn to read energy. Learn to do bhumi analysis. I've given the tools. So, um, so when we all have, each one of us has nadis and meridians. But because some of you have already purified nadis joining this retreat, some of you have, but don't have yet purified meridians. Some of you might have only some bhumi openings, perhaps few perfections, so you're also working with the bhumi side of things. But the point that I'm trying to make is that we all have these two subtle bodies. No one is an exception. No ordinary person is an exception. No spiritual practitioner of whatever tradition they might practice is an exception. And when I spoke of wisdom through emptiness as the first half of enlightenment or the other half of enlightenment, the second half of enlightenment is to return the meridian system that affects the physical body into its original pure state. And when we have a path of wisdom and clarity and path of healing and light together, I'm not making a symbolical teaching about what namaskar means. Wasn't intending to do that. But when we have these two joining, that's the full, complete, perfect enlightenment, also called great perfection. We chant in Amrita Mandala, we chant Bodhisattva vows where great perfection is mentioned. So great perfection is a specific term, Mahasandhi in Sanskrit, Chokchen in Tibetan, which means these two, both purified and released into the nature of reality. So this is how. And 2 weeks ago, it was really fun, I felt. I taught Kriya Yoga for the first time in 10 years. So it had been coming for a long time, and finally I taught it again, having received a number, a dozen or so Amrita deities from my gurus, and I passed some of them to our Sangha members, given empowerments. So, the path of healing and light and the teachings and practices that I've given for it is almost complete. So I haven't given, I think out of those dozen, 12 or 13 Amrita deities that I have received, um, I might, I haven't given except 3 yet to the Sangha. Even 1 is enough, but the genius and the gift of deity empowerments, also on the Buddhist side of things, also in Rainbow Body Yoga, is that when you have different deities, you get to do more specific work on your subtle body, whether with nadis or meridians. So you get more, well, basically it becomes more effective when you're working both with gurus and the deities. Makes it quicker, faster. So I've given only 3 of those 12 so far, although I already saw, I think the first time when I gave Amrita Sundari was in January or February this year, and it was wonderful to see already after a few months how it had a clearly an impact on our Sangha members. So you could see that something is happening in the meridians, and that you can see it from the skin, you can feel it from the energy of people. People get softer. Those traumas and echoes of samsara let go from the meridians. So I've given only 3 of them so far. I gave last week, and I gave Amrita Avalokiteshvara to Acharyas on the Acharya course that I taught. But anyway, so we have Amrita Kriya Yoga that can be practiced with Hindu gurus or with Amrita deities or with both. I understand that to some of you what I just said might be technically a bit confusing, but what I was getting to, what I was meaning to say is that I'm almost done with having like a complete set of practices and empowerments for the path of healing and light. 2 weeks ago on the Kriya Yoga course was the first time when we practiced with Maranatha, who was Jesus's or Ishanath's guru. So from my past life memories and also from my yogic experience, I am presenting Maranatha as the guru of Ishanath or Jesus. I never base, well, that's not how I should say it, but I never use like a scripture. As you know, I never say that, there is this or that scripture that speaks of Jesus and his guru Maranatha. If there was such a scripture, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but I'm a yogi, and you are yogis and yoginis, which means that anything and everything, including Jesus and his presence, his energy, if you are able to tune into him and feel his energy, it means that you can do energetical analysis on him. You can do Bhumi analysis on Jesus or Babaji or anybody. What can also be done is to study lineages of individual masters. What I'm saying that it's possible to validate a master called Maranatha, who lived about 2000 years ago in Kashmir of India, according to my past life memory. I'm not telling you it is irrelevant kind of to speak of him living in Kashmir because he's no longer in Kashmir, but it is simply from my past life memory why I remember that. So the main point is that it is possible for each one of us to verify and validate that Maranatha was actually Jesus' guru, because they are in how do you say, in successive, is that the word? You know, you can find out if they are connected in that way, as guru and disciple who became a guru, and probably the most important, most influential spiritual master that has ever lived on earth. So there's lots of people who pray to Jesus daily. Lots of people, millions and millions. But I think that there's a lot to improve when it comes to praying, and there's a lot to improve in the quality of connection people have with Jesus. And also there's a lot to drop away, shed off of about the way he's been presented, you know, in religion. So, you know, again, we are yogis, we are not believers. So, and we also have the we are fortunate to know how to practice Guru Yoga, how to pray, or how to say mantra in a way that calls the Guru to you, so that we can feel his presence, Jesus' presence, or Maranatha's presence, or any Guru's presence. This is like it is like a bag full of diamonds right there. How to do that? Why? This is the heart and soul of all esoteric meditative paths, all tantric paths, guru transmission. Without a guru, there is no tantric path, and there is actually no way to light body or rainbow body. So it is of incredible wealth, and it's an incredible gift to know how to practice Guru Yoga properly. And I would also like to say, before practicing, I've been also already blabbering for an hour. So I would also like to say about Maranatha that I am not making like a drama or sensation of I'm presenting Jesus as Guru to you. No, no, no. Again, I'm a yogi. I don't want anybody to believe a single word that I say, but I want or would like everybody to feel and to receive what I have felt and received, both from Isha and Maranatha and Babaji and all these masters. So this is the reason why I teach the way I teach, emphasize teaching practices in very efficient way, so that my students learn very quickly how to practice correctly, rather than, you know, if we think of very simple prayer practice or mantra practice, a lot of people just repeat mantras in their heads and keep repeating. It's like a radio in the background, and it's spinning there all the time, the mantra spinning and spinning and spinning, and not much is happening energetically. It's just a thing that is carried around, repeating a prayer, repeating a mantra. But that's just the performing of a technique. This is alone completely insufficient. What is sufficient is that when you say a prayer, you can formulate in it your own words. When you say a prayer from your heart, or when you repeat a mantra, you should put your energy into it. You put your whole being into it. And if you're saying the mantras or praying to Amrita deities or gurus, when that energy is in there, the guru reacts to it. Jesus reacts to it. Babaji reacts to it immediately. When you put your heart and soul into it, your energy into it, dear Babaji, please bless me. Please, please. I'm in trouble here in samsara. I really need your help. He will hear it instantly and send his charge. He will run to you. But I've seen this mistake so many times. It's such a pity that people have the good karma and merit to meet yoga tantra, mantra yoga, and even receive teachings on mantra yoga, tantra yoga. But then they make these basic mistakes in practice. So instead of focusing on using the mantra kind of like a key to unlock a door, to open the door, using a mantra or a prayer as a way to have that energetic experience that will help you to know yourself, recognize yourself as a Mahasiddha, as a Buddha. Instead of that, people focus on Omani Peme Hum, Omani Peme Hum, Omani Peme Hum, Omani Peme Hum. Om Ahum Bensaguru Pema Siddhi Hum, Om Ahum Bensaguru. It's pointless. It's almost pointless. So it's not about quantity, it's about quality. Same thing with like one of the main practices in Amrita Kriya Yoga and all forms of Kriya Yoga is Kriya Pranayama, spinal breathing. And I remember when I was so young when I started practicing Kriya Yoga, young and wet behind the ears, young man, typical young man, more enthusiasm than understanding. So I just did needlessly way too much of Kriya Pranayama. Fortunately, that was my retreat days when I practiced many hours every day, 8 or more every day. So I had time to do that. But my point is that quality is always more, quality is always more important than quantity. Whether it comes to the number of mantras or number of Kriya Pranayamas or any of these things. So all techniques, all practices are just keys to unlock the door. So the key is you're not holding it to put it in the lock and do this, pull it out, put it back in and do this, and keep doing that. That's completely pointless, isn't it? But that's exactly what lots of people are doing with their tantric practices. So they never get from, if you think of race car driving, race car competitions, there is the starting line, and then there's the route that the cars drive, and then there's the finish. But people never get anywhere from starting line, or get a little bit far but then go back, little bit far then go back to start. So basic mistakes, but very easy to fix. Very easy to fix. I've had so many people over the years teaching these basics that I teach. I've had so many people who have spent, I remember this one lady, she was, I don't know, maybe German or Swiss or Austrian. This was maybe 6-7 years ago. She joined a number of retreats. And she was already 70 years old. And she had been practicing since she was like 10, for like over 50 years easily. And she had practiced actually Kriya Yoga. She had practiced Tibetan Buddhism for a long time. And she told me that the way how you teach, it's so familiar. There's a lots of similarities how is taught in more traditional forms of yoga, dharma, and tantra. But she said that the way how she had learned to practice in all those other systems that she had done didn't make sense until she learned the way how I teach them. I've heard that so many times over the years. Many people have told me that. Buddhists, Hindus, or people who have practiced in those traditions. So we have to have a solid basic understanding how to practice, what the practices are, because then we can grow wings and then fly our way to the great, grandiose enlightenment. Just making a little joke there. But that's the way to purify the subtle bodies. That's the way to actually reach enlightenment in the case of every single one of us. That's also one thing that, to me, I am not here in this body teaching to gather followers or students. I want my students to graduate, to become great teachers and masters in the world, because I think it is not correct to just remain as a student from 1 year and from one decade to the next. It is not correct. So I want every one of my students to finish their practice, finish it, not only advance in it, but finish it, and then show the way for others. We might be a little late to finish this session because we only have 50 minutes left according to the set time. But if you need to leave after 50 minutes, you are free to do that. But I just want to say that we are probably a little late from that schedule because I want us to do a solid practice session this evening also to kick off this September weekend retreat. Let's take 5 minute break, 5 minutes, and continue quarter past. So see you in a moment.